am Dr. Dani Rabwin, bringing you Ready, Vet, Go, the podcast. I'm super excited for our guest today, Dr. G. So please stick around. We're going to dive right in. All right, welcome back to another episode of Ready, Vet, Go, the podcast. I have with me today Dr. Greg Gestrin. I'm so excited to have you. Did I say your name correctly?
No.
Can you tell me how to say it again, please?
Gestrin.
Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed.
No worries.
Dr. Gestrin.
I've only had one person ever say it right.
Really?
And it was my German professor in vet school. And I got so stunned because he was like calling roll. And I sat there and didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
You didn't even know how to respond because you got it right.
That's not me.
Well, thank you for forgiving me. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you.
I have so much to learn about you, and I want to hear all about your journey, but welcome.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know that much about you. I mean, we just met. I just learned how to say your last name.
There we go.
Can you...
I just met you.
I know. I'd love to hear, before we get into what you're doing now, just sort of about your journey into veterinary medicine. Like what drew you into vet med and how did you come to get here?
Yeah, so I grew up here. I grew up in Irvine. So been in Orange County guy my whole life. And at the very beginning, I wanted to be an actor. And then being in Orange County, my mom's like, well, I'm never driving you to LA. So pick something different. Yeah. And we just kind of were talking about it. And she was like, a veterinarian, you love animals kind of thing. And I was probably like 7 or something like that. And so I was like, okay, yeah, great. Let's do it. Volunteered at the Irvine Animal Shelter. And then in high school was volunteering at a local veterinary hospital, learned, that was actually something I really liked, that I'm not squeamish with blood, that I could handle these kind of things. So watching the surgeon, I remember an exploratory and he just pulled everything out. And I was just like, oh, that is the coolest thing in the world. And then he just like jiggled the body wall back and he was like, that's how you put it back.
It just goes back in.
Goes back in.
That's so good.
And then went to Cal Poly Pomona, did a pre-vet over there. That was amazing. They had a large farm over there. And so worked with horses, goats, sheep, cows. Like we just did the whole gamut and that was amazing. Graduated in 2009, so right when the economy was hitting, and didn't get a good job, but then volunteered at the Orange County Zoo, and then they hired me. And so I became a relief veterinarian, a relief animal keeper over there.
Oh,
and
neat.
Did that for about 2.5 years, volunteered with the zoo veterinarian, and then finally got into school.
So this work after undergrad was with the intention of applying to veterinary school?
Oh, I was applying every year.
And so you just hadn't been getting in. I think that's just an important thing to say since we have a lot of early 100%. Career listeners and people who are trying to get in. Like, I didn't get in my first year and you didn't get in. And then you get to do cool things. I also worked at a zoo in between.
Where'd you go?
At the Los Angeles Zoo.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Just getting volunteer hours because we have to get creative.
Oh,
So, okay, just want to normalize that. So,
totally.
Okay, so you're applying
I
and getting more experience.
So finally got accepted into Midwestern, which was the new veterinary school in Arizona. I was the first graduating class and loved that. It was really cool. It was a little family setting at the first year because it was 100 of us, I think 110, and then the professors. And then the school just progressed from there. And graduated in 2018 and been practicing veterinary medicine since then.
Oh, I love that story. So what was it like being the first classes at a veterinary school? When Midwestern was opening, there weren't a lot of new schools opening, but now there are.
Oh, I know.
And so I think, for a lot of people, they're going to be the first at many of these new schools that are going to be opening over the next couple of years. Did you have reservations about going to a school that didn't have a reputation?
I was just excited to be in.
Yes.
That's the truth of it.
So is that is where you got in?
Yeah, that was the only place I was listening to you outside when I was waiting, and I remember times when I didn't get accepted, and this one specific time of like being in a ball crying on the ground kind of thing. Like, I can't believe I didn't get in again. After 5 years, your prereqs start to drop out. You can't actually, you have to like renew your prereqs, and so I was on that cusp of never being able to potentially get into vet school again. Because the colleges were also not really accepting me or weren't letting me take the classes I would need to redo those prereqs because I was already a college graduate. Why are they going to let me take those classes over somebody else? Like I was going to OCC and things, try to increase my GPA. And so, I mean, I was just flabbergasted that I finally got accepted.
I bet.
It was a godsend to get in.
And so can you tell me about veterinary school? Did you know what you wanted to do after vet school? Were there, let's start with that.
Yeah. So being a zoo volunteer and working at the zoo, I kind of knew that was not the route I wanted. I loved it. 100% exotics is amazing. For me, it was like the behavior side of things was the coolest part. Training all these different animals. I remember like one of the first animals I trained by myself was a golden pheasant. Oh. And I was just amazed by how smart this bird was. Yeah. And you're thinking like, it's just a golden pheasant. It's just this dumb bird, right? Yeah. And that thing's running circles around me.
What were you training it to do?
Just to like get up onto a platform so that I could have a talk with the people walking by and do like an
so you were doing like
talk.
Client or like education for guests. Yeah, right. Oh, what a neat experience.
And so like get the bird up on there and be able to display itself and show them all the things. And this bird would be like, heck no, not unless you give me like 5 mealworms or something. It was like this crazy dynamic of you would do the training and then take 2 steps back. You'd get a step forward and 2 steps back. And it taught me a lot about animal behavior in general. Yeah. And that whole side. So back to your question. I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't think I'd be able to handle small animal when I got out of vet school. So I was thinking like, I can handle large animal. That is definitely something I enjoy. I like
But
being
why
around
not?
them.
Why didn't you think you could handle it? Okay.
Yeah. I didn't get a whole lot of experience in small animal before getting into vet school. Oh, okay. So I had a few like volunteer jobs or like kennel assistant, veterinary assistant, but not for very long, like maybe in a cumulative of 8 months to a year kind of thing. And then, seeing all these other people that through those 5 years go by me, get into vet school, they have many, many years of that experience. So to me, it was one of those things of like just the dream that I didn't think I could attain. And so I was like, okay, like large animal, go do farm stuff and saying goodbye to my family, being like, I don't know if I'll come back, like going to Arizona. And then the school ended up just being much more small animal driven. We definitely had large animal classes and there was a lot going on there. Yeah. But in the end, when I graduated, I was like, actually, I think I can do this. Then jumped in and did that. So it was kind of one of those things where I knew I was in the field long enough to kind of understand what options were there. Right. But I didn't actually follow through with what I thought when I got into vet school, which seems to be common.
I think it's really common, and I love to hear that story. Like you just didn't think that you had enough experience, but then you got in and something changed. Yeah. Was there an experience in vet school or a mentor or professor that you connected with or something that happened that helped kind of shift that?
I think it was just more what I did in vet school. Like I thought I wanted to be a surgeon, so I spent a lot of time with the shelter people, and so I was constantly in on the shelter medicine side of things, doing spays, neuters. Ended up that I don't. It's not that I don't like surgery, and for the most part, I feel like I'm good at it. Yeah. But it's one of those things that if I don't have to have it in my life, it is easier.
You'll be okay.
Yeah, like just the stress of it all. Going into practice like that day and knowing if I have a spay or not just kind of like sets my nerves on. And so being able to go in and be like, I don't have any surgeries makes things so much easier.
Yeah. For you now in your role as a relief veterinarian, you mean? Okay. Well, I definitely want to get to that. Yeah. Okay, so you're in vet school. You realize I actually can do small animal. Right. That's where you wanted to go. Yeah. And then what happened? You said you were thinking of surgery and then realized
that's a good question.
Yeah, so what shifted there?
I went to a surgical rotation and did not like them.
Them, the people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Surgeons are special, and I think all of veterinary people know this. You have to have a very strong opinion of yourself to be one, and I think that's super important. Like, you should not be going in and doing crazy, insane surgery if you don't believe in yourself that you are potentially the best person to do this. Yeah. And so it led to a lot of kind of like back and forth, and I just didn't feel like I was treated well with these individuals. And it just kind of turned me off. I had really good surgical professors and I loved them. They were very empathetic. But I think a big part of that is like, that's why they're in school. Right. And these ones are practicing, you know? And so it was just one of those things where I didn't feel like I wanted to subject myself to that kind of environment.
It's so interesting because really it shows that it was the people or this experience. And I can't imagine that it's like that everywhere. You know, I'm sure like one can go and work with some really amazing, you know, surgeons who would be excited to welcome you and that you would connect with.
Good mentors.
But that have good mentorship but just that small thing, you know, and it just makes me think like how often is that happening? And it turned out great. It sounds like you're happy with what you're doing, and I can't wait to hear more about it. But it would have been interesting, you know, had you had a different experience in that surgical rotation.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, you know, up until that point, it was one of those questions, and I didn't know if I wanted to go into specialty or not, but it was definitely on the cusp of my brain of like, oh, maybe I could do this. I was also thinking like pathology, but in the end, like getting into small animal practice was just the most lucrative thing to do, and going to a private school, it was like, oh crap, all these loans.
Right, exactly. And honestly, GP, like I am a GP super fan. I've been a GP for over 20 years. We actually get to do all of those things. We are surgeons and clinical pathologists and all of the things. So, you know, as much as I adore my specialist friends and we need them, we get to do it all. So, okay, so you graduated, and then what did you do right after school?
So, I played the two large companies against each other, and they flew me out here, and they put me in a hotel, and they gave me a car. It was really cool. So definitely try to do that if you can, because it just felt really cool. But then I ended up taking a job down Laguna, and was there for, I think, like 3 years, from 2018 to 2021.
So 3 years is good. I mean, you know, there's a lot of turnover among new grads in their first job. What was it about that particular practice that made you take that job? What were they offering? Why did you choose that practice? It sounds like you had another one that you were looking at as well.
So one of them was in like Lancaster. And
okay, so for those of people who don't know.
True, yep. It's like the desert outside of LA. Like at least an hour and a half outside of LA. And so I talked with the owner there, and he was kind of like, you know, if you're trying to have a social life, this isn't the place for you.
The owner of that practice said that?
Yeah.
Makes me love him.
Yeah, he was very nice.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah, I walked into that hospital and they had a banner for me.
Oh,
it was like,
but he's like, come here, we really want you. But if you want a social life, you're a young person who's just graduating vet school,
like
maybe.
If you want to find a wife, if you want, you know, or a loved one, kind of, you know. And he was really great. And so he drove me around the entire town and was kind of like, okay, if you did stay here, this is the place to stay. If, you know, and I just was kind of like, in the end, just, I kind of took that to heart with like, I do want to find a family and start one. And if I can get back into Orange County, then that's probably the best way for me to go. So I got into this one because of location primarily. I liked the manager there, and I was informed that I'd have a mentorship program going. In the end, the doctor who was going to mentor me left before I even got there.
Common story, sadly.
Another one also then left. And I was left with one other doctor for, I want to say like 6 months to like 8 months. It was just me and her. And she was very holistic, so we just didn't, as a new veterinarian, it was hard to meet on the same level.
Holistic meaning she practiced a holistic style of medicine, more like Eastern, like acupuncture.
She was doing acupuncture,
got
things
it.
like that,
And that wasn't your
I'd never
area.
had that experience. Right. And so part of it was kind of like, in the beginning, I would go to her and say like, hey, you know, I've got this case, I want to do this, and she would recommend something else, and I'd be like, well, I mean, all of my books say this. And that's kind of opposite of what you're saying. And so we just kind of like came to a point where we couldn't really communicate with veterinary medicine like that because of our different views, and I was too afraid to try new things as a new veterinarian. Like, I just wanted to follow the books. And so it just kind of led to an issue there, and then we got a new doctor on. She ended up becoming the medical director, and she was very knowledgeable and very helpful, and it just kind of ended up being that I just couldn't stay at that practice any longer. I was doing relief work on the side, and I really just enjoyed jumping from different hospitals to different hospitals, never being stuck with like one specific staff, and all the mayhem that kind of happens in a single hospital that everyone goes to day in and day out. And so then in June of 2021, I just kind of was like, I talked to my wife and was like, hey, I think it's time for me to jump ship and and try something new. And luckily it worked out.
And by that time you'd been in practice for 3 years?
Yeah, like 3.5.
So
like that.
You were already exploring relief during your early career, within that like 0 to 3
I think
years
within,
out.
Like, a year in, some other hospitals of the company needed help, and so then I was kind of like, okay, I was working 4 days a week, I could take another day. And I went to a few other hospitals and did that, and I enjoyed it.
How did you didn't connect with the associate veterinarian who was practicing the holistic style medicine, and that was a really pivotal stage in your career, transitioning out of school. And then you took this leap into relief, which was also a huge jump and not a lot of consistency. How did you find support? Was there somebody in your life that you were able to talk to? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I just had my friends from school. We have like this tight little group that, I mean, over the years, everybody kind of does their own thing. But we would have this text thread, and it was just kind of like, they, in my opinion, are brilliant. And I just relied on them through school. They helped me graduate and get through. And I would just send a text like, oh my God, I have this case. Like, please help me. Like, I remember one of my friends, I had an anal sac rupture, and she was like, A, B, C, D, just do that and you'll be fine. And that's now my like go-to for any anal sac rupture. And so it was really.
Can you tell me what A, B, C, D is?
Yeah, so it was like, flush the anal sac, instill it with like an Animax or triple antibiotic ointment, get them on some kind of anti-inflammatory and antibiotic, keep going, like like e-collar. Obviously you shave the area. That was something new for me. Was I actually had a case where like a single hair stayed in the anal sac of this cat in the rupture, and it would not heal. A single hair.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, like, I think after a month, they came back. We were continuing. I didn't notice that hair was there.
Right.
And then I finally noticed it, cut it off, and the cat healed.
Wow.
And so that was a huge one of, like, now every single one, I'm like, shave around
Absolutely.
that, like a mast cell tumor.
Yeah,
right. Get your margins.
Right. That's the kind of thing that you really don't necessarily learn in veterinary school. That's like in the trenches, kind of like your daily thing that is just, those don't make it to referral teaching hospitals or specialty centers where you might be doing a rotation. That's stuff you need to learn kind of on the ground. And what a lifeline and a gift to have that group from vet school that you can really reach out to. That's how I started the Ready Vet Go mentorship program. I had a mentee and she had a text group of friends who were in practice who didn't have mentorship like she did. So they would text her and then she would come to me with their questions.
Of course,
and I would go, that's not your case. And she would say, no, it's not my case. Can you help? And I said, well, you don't need to be the go-between. And so we formed a Zoom group with myself and the people who were on her text thread.
Cool.
And, I saw that a lot of mentorship can be done remotely. And so that's how I launched my program. But I just, all this to say that those relationships that you form in veterinary school are just, they can be such a lifeline. And I think when we think about mentorship, we often think of a more experienced person bringing up a less experienced person, but peer mentorship, peer-to-peer is real. It's legit. It's a very important part of mentorship, and it sounds like that group was important for you.
I always took myself as like the outside of the box thinker in this group. Like they're all brilliant and do a really good job, and I was the one that was like, let's throw some zebras into this mix. Like, is there a unicorn we can think about?
But it was good to have people ground you and go, actually, those are just horse hoof beads. It's not a zebra this time.
Exactly.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so your peer group and this text group was a real lifeline for you. And then, I imagine you needed to have some of your own kind of internal confidence to be able to go out and do relief at that early stage in your career.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a big piece of it that I don't necessarily recommend starting relief too early because you're commonly there by yourself. And even if you're not, like those doctors that are there with you, they might be nice, but they don't know you. And they're going to be kind of hesitant about things. And veterinarians are strange people in general. And so, we're not all super social. Some of us are very antisocial. And so you have to be able to kind of read the room and understand how much you can interrupt to get assistance, even for the technicians and things like that too, right? And so luckily, like I'm a very personable individual, and so I was able to navigate that side of things well. And I think most of the team members that I worked with liked me. I can't say, every veterinarian did, because we all just have our own little quirks and things. But yeah, I mean, I was super nervous. One of my first medical director, I told her at one point, I'm going to have to make mistakes. You can't stop me from making mistakes. It's how I'm going to learn. Yeah. And she was like, if I can stop you from making mistakes, I will. And I was like, you can't. I understand that you don't want me to make mistakes. This is your hospital and you don't want me to, but at the same time, I'm going to. Yeah. And I have to learn. And sadly, I did when I took a relief shift where I didn't know it was an emergency shift. And I showed up and they were like, oh yeah, this is an emergency. And I was like, no. Yeah. I've never done that before. Yeah. And I ended up losing a patient because I misdiagnosed it. Yeah. And that was just heartbreaking. Yeah. One of those moments again of going home and just kind of crying because you screw up and you just feel so bad about it.
I usually save this for the end, but this is exactly the right time to talk about this case if we can go a little bit more deeply. Sure. Because in my role as a mentor and working with so many mentees, one of the things that I find that early career vets really like to know is the mistakes that we made and how we are still sitting here today enjoying our profession. And sometimes the mistakes are when a patient dies. And I think it's really, really valuable for us where we sit to share those mistakes. And you kind of brought it on. So I'm wondering if you're willing to go there and just kind of share what was that case?
Yeah. So I think it was 6 p.m. I think the shift was till 9 p.m. So it was, of course, those horrible ones. Yeah. A pug came in, open mouth breathing, and just in respiratory distress kind of thing. So get them under the X-ray, and I at that point was not doing the look at everything on the X-ray. Yeah. So that's super important, right? That's what I'm teaching anyone that I talk to now, trying to mentor in any way. Look at the bones, then take an A, B, C, D step to an X-ray so that you see everything. Yeah. I thought the pug had it didn't look like a GDV, but it looked like a pretty large stomach. That was the reason why this dog was panting and having a hard time breathing. Yeah. So I focused on GDV and didn't see that the heart was actually the problem. Yeah. Right? You probably immediately were like, oh, that dog's got a heart problem.
I don't know.
Yeah. And so I overloaded it with fluids, right? Because that's what the books and what you're supposed to do. Put in a catheter into its saphenous vein and just pumped it with fluids and had it on oxygen. I had a tube in its nose trying to pull air out of the stomach, doing all the things appropriate without the surgical side of things. Yeah. Because that was definitely not in my wheelhouse. Yeah. And I kept telling the client, I don't think you should be here. I sadly, I'll be honest with you, I don't think I'm the right veterinarian for this case, and I really think you should go to a real emergency hospital where they can take care of your dog. Yeah. There's something wrong. Your dog's not getting better. We have it on oxygen, and its levels are still going down. Yeah. In the end, I finally convinced her to do it, and in the car, the dog passed away. She came back 5 minutes after we discharged. Yeah. My dog's not alive anymore. Yeah. And I ended up figuring it out because the medical director of that hospital called me the next day and was like, hey, did you notice that the heart was enlarged? Yeah. And I was like, no. Yeah. And it just broke me down.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. I really feel for you in that moment. I think every veterinarian has a story like that or more than one. Right. And I think there's real value in us connecting over those stories and normalizing them. Right. There's so many amazing pearls that I heard in this story. One thing that I think is just really admirable that you were doing is you were being really open and communicative with the client. Right. And I think that, I don't know how it ended with the client. I'd love to know what came of that.
I don't know either.
So maybe
she was pissed.
Well, but it sounds like you would have known had there been a board complaint. Right. And so it didn't go in that direction. And I imagine that some of that had to do with the way that you were communicating. Yeah. I wonder too, it sounds like the way the medical director communicated with you, it's what I'm getting from it, it sounded slightly gentle. It came from the way you tell the story is she came from a place of curiosity. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that. Do you remember what that phone call was like or how she handled that?
Yeah. So different medical director, but he had called me the next morning and was like, you should have called me. If you being in my hospital, if you have a case that you are really struggling with, like, I'm here for you, and call me, and we can, you know, go over this, and you can take a picture of the x-ray. You know, I believe I tried to send out the x-ray for a consult, and she declined it. You know, there were all these things that I was trying to do gold standard, and a client just doesn't always have the ability.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it ended up being that I just didn't have all the answers, and he was like, you could have sent it out. Like, I would have taken the cost. It wouldn't have been a problem. Just get it done, kind of thing. And yeah, he was really gentle. Never called me back for another shift, which is fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he was a really good guy, and I had worked with him before, and he was very open to communication, and being there if I had a case, and but it was like 6 p.m. I didn't want to bother him.
Of course,
you know, it was like it's his time off, and
that's
I'm
part of your
there.
role as a relief veterinarian is to allow them to have time off.
Exactly.
And you were taking that seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, I mean, there's a lot of learning moments in that story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you know, it was really hard.
Yeah.
Are there things that you do to help get you through things like that?
Yeah. So one of the big things that before I got into vet school, I learned how to meditate. And so that was something that's like really been helpful, learning how to kind of like take your breaths and calm and like make sure that your nerves don't get too big on you.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the fastest ways to just have nothing, right? Shut down, and you have no ability to move forward.
Yeah.
So taking a breath, taking that opportunity to kind of like calm myself down.
Yeah.
I have 2 notebooks with me at all times. So one notebook is an address book that I turned into all of my drugs. So all the drugs that I commonly use and all the doses that I like. And so there's all these like cross off of like, okay, this was Plum's recommendation, and then it's like, nah, I don't really like that. The anesthesiologist from school gave me a dose that like aggressive dog, like go a little bit higher on your dexmedetomidine. And so I've got kind of like all my little scribbles and notes on what I can use and how to use it and what it does, its half-life and all that kind of stuff. So then I don't have to go through Plums and like really
these are all written in your handwriting and from your experience and people that you've worked with. Love that. Okay.
And then the other one is all of my little pearls on certain diseases. So like I've got 3 pages on diabetes in this little handbook. And so, yeah, what I've done is just kind of had these resources when I have colleagues that give me some good information, I write it down and I try to get it into my book so that I can look back, because I don't have the greatest of memories. And I think that's something that we all are going to struggle with, is like you can't remember everything.
No.
It's impossible. And so when I have a case that's a problem or I need to kind of refresh myself, I just go back to that. I use Vin a ton. Like, I mean, that is indispensable. Because one, you can just go on there and talk to other veterinarians and get some good information. You can vent if you want, and there's a lot of anonymous opportunities that I love reading all the all the tea there. And yeah, so those are kind of like having the resources. Like, you can definitely have your big books and all of the textbooks that are helpful. But it's definitely not something that I found helpful when in an emergency, like going through all the pages trying to find the exact page, right? It's so much easier to go into Vin and search it and get that information. The other day I was actually in clinic and I had a case that was a little bit difficult, like a 5-month-old little white dog, vomiting, not eating, super skinny. And what I did was, I'm trying to be the mentor of my team, of my technicians at this hospital. It's a teaching hospital. And so I had a whiteboard and I wrote down vomiting. And I put every differential that's common for vomiting. And we went through the blood work and the x-rays and the history. And I was circling things, crossing things out. Like, okay, this blood work shows that it's not this and that and that. And I kind of like did that with them. And I was like, sorry guys, I'm going to go quick, because I got to do this for myself and I'm going to teach you guys. And they were all just kind of sitting there wide-eyed. And then at the end I was like, how did that go? And they were all like, you do this every time. And I'm like, it's not to this extent, but like when I do have a difficult case, like, you know, and I've got to do it in minutes, you know, not necessarily in the hour I took to talk to them. It was a little bit slow that day, so I had the opportunity to do that. And then the other benefit was that this this patient was a drop-off and hospitalization. So I had that time to really go through it.
Yes. And what an amazing exercise for people to see what goes on inside of your brain when you're working out a case. You know, it's very methodical, it's very stepwise, and it just takes practice doing that over and over and over again every single time. And what a gift to them, really, to be able to kind of like see that. And how awesome at a teaching hospital. Yeah. That's so, I just love that. What was the outcome?
We don't know.
So even though you go through all those steps, we often just still don't know.
I kind of think it was an Addisonian. But then I'm also wondering if there's something going on at home, because this dog should not have been as skinny as it was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And its sodium was, I think, 113.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And so for your listeners, like, I think like 145 is the low.
Yeah.
Depending on which company you're going with.
Yeah.
And so like I was taught, because I was always the kid in school that was like, I had so many questions. So I just raised my hand. I was like, I'm paying a ton of money a year. I don't care about anybody else. I'm asking all my questions. And I remember asking in pathology, like, okay, so, you know, there's certain values here that are very important. If sodium is down, like it showed, like when we would talk about it, a couple points down, and my professor was saying it's a problem. And I was like, so when is sodium down and it's a real problem?
Yeah.
And they said something like 10 points down.
Yeah.
And so looking at this, 30 points down, I was like, oh my God.
You knew that it was really serious.
Yeah.
That's one of the hard things I think about veterinary school is you're learning, you know, reference ranges and normals, and you don't always know, like, which ones do I really need to pay attention to? Because some things, you know, alk phos, a few off, and just ignore. Or not ignore, but, you know, don't prioritize maybe as highly. But that, you know, I think is so important. And then to be able to be the person to ask those questions. I wish I was that person in vet school. Even just thinking about raising my hand and asking a question, I would just get butterflies in my stomach. And so I just...
And I did too, but I just have learned, like, just the way that I am, it's just like, just go for it.
Yeah. And then you remember that, you know, years later, that professor saying, you know, even just a couple points down on sodium, you better be paying attention. And so you knew for this one, like, that's a really important key thing. I want to talk more about your relief business. So you decided to take the plunge into relief, and now you have your own relief business. Can you tell me how that came about and your relief journey?
So, for the most part, I believe most of us starting a relief just go sole proprietor. And so that basically means that the company, the hospital, is paying you directly, and then you've got to figure out your taxes on the back end and make sure that you pay them appropriately. And so that was really cool, just getting a full paycheck and then kind of playing the tax game. And I love that about what I get to do now. And so I did that for like 6 months to a year. I'd been always kind of liking the idea of at-home visits and at-home care and thinking like and truthfully, I think that that's something that we as a profession need to get more involved in and is a good way for us as veterinarians to get away from the corporate model and take over our industry again. But that's a whole nother side. And so I wanted to do like a vaccine clinic, like a pop-up clinic, and provide kind of low-cost vaccines. And my father is a financial advisor. My uncle's a lawyer. They advised me to get an LLC for protection in case something were to happen. So I ended up getting an LLC and then finding out later from a veterinary lawyer that wasn't really the best way to go about it. And so then he got me to get into an S corporation. And so that's now what I have. And so, excuse me. So that's kind of like the IRS, the tax side of things, setting up the business, because you can absolutely go sole proprietor throughout as long as you want. I think most veterinary hospitals are LLCs. And then I've been hearing more, like I went to Western this year and I sat in on a lawyer talk, and he was like, you know, you guys should get out of the LLCs and get into the S Corps. It's more protection. So I was kind of proud of myself for having that step already. But the big part of it is, you know, having hospitals to go to and maintaining your days and getting through and having enough to make it worth your while. So I was joining in on, like, VCA had a website that I could go in and take shifts with. Banfield had the same thing. There's other online resources and companies that offer relief shifts. So I've kind of like been jumping onto as many of these as I can. And then I was also just doing cold calls to hospitals. dropping off my resume, a cover letter, and saying like, hey, I'm a relief veterinarian. If you guys are ever in need, here's my number, and you can call me. And then I developed a contract. I used ChatGPT to just like produce this 5-page contract that I have. And so, yeah, it was kind of just step by step. I really just kind of put it together with a lot of good advice from professionals, a lawyer, and then also an accountant. So get your CPA and get a good lawyer who knows what's going on. And yeah, it's really been a really interesting journey.
Was that something that you were interested in before launching this journey? Like the business side, you said you enjoy the tax information. I'm like, I do not relate to that at all. I think it's awesome. More power to you. Is that something that you knew that you were interested in, the business side of veterinary medicine?
I think before getting to vet school, I definitely had that idea of owning my own practice. Going through those classes in vet school, kind of learning what it would be to own your own practice kind of led me out of that idea, and then getting in and seeing how things are and the astronomical price of what it would be to get a practice kind of led me away from that idea. And I love that I actually have a business, like I own my own practice, but it's in a completely different way than what we all expect. And so, yeah, I think that part of my journey to become a veterinarian, because I didn't take the normal route of like straight A's, go from high school straight into undergrad, straight into vet school. I had a lot of opportunities to kind of explore my life and see different sides. Like I was a clerk at a law firm. I was like an assistant for a realtor company kind of thing. Like I just took jobs that I could and try to survive, right? And when you go from just straight through the normal route to get into veterinary school, I just feel like a lot of us miss life. And the opportunity to learn other things. And, you know, I really got an opportunity to spend time with my friends and go out and do things because I was working, but had some extra cash to go and live life. And when you're just going through school and then you jump straight into veterinary life, I think that that would have been quite difficult for me, because when you get out of veterinary school and you become a veterinarian, you just dive straight into it. And most of us are working 10, 12-hour days, and you really don't have the opportunity for much life outside of that. Maybe you get your 3 days off, but you're exhausted. You don't necessarily want to, like for me, I didn't want to go interact with people. I just want to stay in my house because it was like all I did all day was be a sponge to other people's emotions. And so to be able to stay home and like binge watch something or play the video games that I like really helped me decompress in that way. But yeah, I think I had the business acumen, especially with my father being a financial advisor, teaching me how to take care of my own finances and things like that. And the tax game for me is like a really great way because you see so much of your money being given to the government. And this was a really fun way to be like, oh, how much can I keep?
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I love hearing about all the different jobs that you had before vet school. And I think, you know, yes, it allowed you to kind of live your life and see so many other things, but also I imagine there's so many skills that you learned that you can then take into being a veterinarian, working with clients, being a good communicator, which you are, which doesn't come easily to a lot of people in our profession. You know, knowing how to, you know, interact with other people, and then kind of the business side. You know, you've had like so many good jobs. You know, it sounded like when you were telling us about your journey into veterinary school that it was frustrating getting those rejection letters, but then it gave you more opportunity to pick up other jobs along the way.
And learn new things and learn about myself. I graduated vet school at, like 7 years ago, so like 31. Got in around like 26. So, I mean, I lived a life before vet school. And I had classmates who were getting in early to vet school, right? So instead of like doing a full 4 years of undergrad, they were doing their 3 years, getting in early. And it was like, oh man, you're like so young. Is this truly what you, have you lived a life and are going to be able to actually like bond and understand the clients and see, because I think so much of what we have to do in practice is be empathetic to our clients, understand their plight, understand that, you know, they probably don't have enough money to pay for everything. And even if they, I mean, so many of it is like, I don't have the money, but I will. I'll find it no matter where I can. And for me, it's kind of like, don't bankrupt yourself, because if you don't have any money, how are you going to take care of your pet? And so like being able to have that empathy and that that communication and be able to kind of like look at their life and be in their shoes, I think is super important for us, because that's a big part of why so many of us can become cynical and just be like, oh, this idiot client won't pay for what they need. Obviously the dog needs it, and they just aren't willing.
Yes.
And that can lead to the burnout that we all experience.
Yes.
And also just kind of like really putting up too many walls that separate you from that client and stop you from being able to connect.
I love that you bring that up. I mean, that really is one of my passion projects. I speak a lot about shared decision making. I speak at veterinary schools about shared decision making. I talk to seasoned practitioners about it. I think there's a real well-being piece around sharing in the decision with your client and being empathetic and understanding where they're coming from. It's not always just about finances either. You know, people come to their interaction with their veterinarian with a whole host of values and beliefs and life experiences, physical ability to administer things, pocketbooks, so many things. And when we are attached to a certain outcome, and when our clients don't choose that outcome, suddenly they're a bad pet owner. That affects us as veterinarians. And we feel like, well, my profession sucks because it's too expensive, or I'm a shitty vet because I couldn't express the value of what I'm offering. And so to be able to do what you're talking about, like have that empathetic piece and sit, kind of side by side and work together to come up with an outcome that benefits the patient and the family. I think there's a real well-being piece. And from my perspective, like watching early career vets, getting skills that will give them longevity in the profession because we need them. We need you.
I know.
We can't have people just burning out and leaving, and you work too hard to get here. So I love that you're doing that. Do you feel like as a relief veterinarian, you can take some of that into the practices where you go? Do you know Dr. Cindy Trice, the founder of Relief Rover?
I don't.
She's my vet school bestie, and so she founded Relief Rover. And
I work with them.
I assumed you did. So she describes you relief veterinarians as pollinators, taking amazing bits of information and depositing them into lots of different clinics. And so I just wonder, like, you coming with this background and this ability to connect with clients and this like view of empathy, do you have interaction to work with early career vets or other veterinarians where you can kind of be a mentor role or pollinate some of this kind of wisdom that you have?
Yeah. So I think for the most part, a lot of that interaction is with the technicians. Because of course they're the ones you work with the most in that situation. I've definitely had new veterinarians that I'm working alongside of, and I'm able to be available for. I always make sure that like I kind of like gauge the person and kind of let's figure out how much they want me to talk to them. And when I find out like, oh, okay, they are open and they're willing to communicate, and then it's like, hey, let me know if you have a case. Like I'm willing to. Can I come to you with a case? Like, can we come together and have an understanding for the day that we can talk to each other? Because there's other doctors who, like, I've had one who just walked up and told me what to do one day, and I was like, who are you? Like, I'm a doctor here, and I don't even know who you are. You can't just come up and talk to me like that. And then she's like, oh, well, I'm one of the primary doctors here. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. Like, you could have just been some random person. And, so it's definitely interesting. And if you are going to do relief, you have to be able to play these kind of political balances to know who you can stand up to and who you can, like, who you have to be soft with. But so much of that pollination idea, I think, is like going in and being not like a relief vet, but like a relief to their own feelings. Like that technician who's like, oh my God, I don't know who this doctor is. And are they going to be mean? Are they going to be difficult? And being able to go in and just be like gentle and be communicative and be like, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. I make mistakes too. Let's just work through it. If you have something that you need to learn, let's talk about it. Maybe we can learn together. And I think that that's the big pollination side in general. But then, of course, there's also, like the whole team there. You have kennel staff, you have potentially like cleaners, you have receptions, customer service representatives. There's a large amount of people in almost all of these hospitals. And to be that doctor who just like puts their head down, walks in, sees their cases and walks out is you can do that. But you're not going to get repeat clients that way. You're not going to find that hospital manager who calls you and says like, hey, I got a shift. Like, please, can you come in? We really love you. And have those relationships that continue. If you're a really good doctor, there's a lot of us that can just make things happen and get things done. But you really need to figure out that like it's not just about you and your case. That there's a whole community there around you that you can influence in either way, positively or negatively. And please just be positive to these people.
Oh, yes.
It's so sad.
They're working so hard.
Right.
I love that. And I think that's such an important job of the relief veterinarian, because as, somebody just in my practice for many years, my clients really are the pet owners.
Right.
As a relief veterinarian, your clients are also the practice owner. And so it sounds like you take that role really seriously. You're coming in. I loved what you said. It's not just we're doing relief as relief vets. We're like bringing relief. Like, exactly. I just sort of love that idea. I never really thought of it.
I've never said it like that before.
I know. I just love that you were like saying that. And it just, it makes so much sense because people are kind of on edge when a relief veterinarian comes in because of all the things you just described. And so to be able to be that sense of relief and for the practice owner to know that they can trust you and that their clients are in good hands with you. I think that's a really important piece. I think people get so dazzled by the relief lifestyle, the flexibility and the money and all of that, and forgetting that you are in service to those clinic owners and that team. And that I'm sort of hearing that from you.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right in the sense of like the practice owner, but the team has so much say also, right? Like if you're just playing it up to the practice owner, which most of the time they're veterinarians, and it's easy to make that connection with a veterinarian, right? 'Cause as long as you have the lingo and you know the walk and the talk or whatever it is. But if you're not nice to the team, they're going to go to that practice owner and be like, please don't ever bring that doctor back here. And I think that that's, just as important. And any single person in that facility could go to that person and say, hey, like, he wasn't very nice. Like I said good morning to him and he just walked right by. And so, you have to be open. You can't just go in and be closed off to it all. If you're going to do relief, because so much of that, especially if you're not just working through these companies where you just go online and it's so informal. If you're going in and trying to be consistent, you have to make those relationships.
Yes, I think that's such good advice. What advice do you have for like veterinary technicians who want to improve their skills, or an early career vet who needs some support? What advice do you have for them for engaging with a relief veterinarian? Because I think relief veterinarians can be amazing mentors, even if they're only in the practice for one day. You can make a really powerful impact in the life of somebody who wants to learn or needs support. How would you suggest they interact with a relief veterinarian to know, are they even open to being that person for me? How should they navigate that?
I think, like, this is all just off the top of my head, but I think initially see how they respond to you in a good morning way, right? Like, oh, hey, good morning, I'm so-and-so, and do they just kind of like, okay, like I got my coffee. Like, how many cases do we have? Like, are they gruff? Are they kind of like just like standoffish, or are they like, oh, hey, it's so great to meet you, like, thank you? And I'll have good days and bad days, of course, right? But if that first initial response is like positive, then I think that opens your door to be like, okay, let's try another step. And I think it's also important, as we all kind of understood going into veterinary medicine, and if you were ever a technician or anything, like, you can't just walk up to your doctor and start a conversation, because so many times we could be in a case where my mind is just like rolling and I can't stop. And if you do stop me, it might disrupt that and cause me problems. And not to say that I'm going to lash out at you, because of course don't ever do that to your team. But it might be like, hey, I need a second kind of thing, right? So that's the other side too, is like, if you go up and ask them a question and they lash out, just leave that doctor alone. Like, you don't need, you maybe will only see them once in your life, and you don't need to push that button and see if it explodes. Like, let's just leave that button there and try to find that somewhere else. But if they're kind and they're nice and they're empathetic to you and they're open and they're just like, hey, sorry, I need to finish this right now. Because for me, I'm like, I have to get to my notes and then I'm open. Because to me, it's like case, notes, then I can do the next thing. I'm not one of those doctors who can do case, chat a little bit, and then notes, because I forget what I'm doing. Right. And so commonly my technicians will come up and they'll be like, hey, we got a new case. Are you ready? And I'm like, oh no, like, I'm
gotta get this out.
Let me know, like, I'll get back to you. And so I think it's just like reading the room, kind of like I've been saying, right? Like, are you able to read the room and understand that person in that moment, how they're feeling. And if you're empathetic, you can kind of gauge that a little bit.
You can gauge that,
And so a big part of it is like, be open. Don't judge someone off the bat. We are getting a lot of overseas veterinarians coming in, and some of them are hard to understand with their accents and things like that. And so don't judge that person on anything superficial, because so many of them are very knowledgeable, and you just need to kind of, and also coming overseas, they have different cultures. And so you need to kind of be able to understand the difference in the American culture, which we are very like gung-ho. Like we just go things head on, and other cultures are not like that. And so you need to kind of understand a little bit of that play, that political play.
Yeah, and I think you can use a little bit of curiosity too, especially if you're having trouble connecting with somebody or not really understanding where they're coming from. We can ask. Yeah, and if you're asking 100%. From a place of genuine curiosity and empathy, then that can go a long way. I love that. So I was thinking, like, it's when you were talking about advice for people to take advantage of, the guidance of a relief veterinarian. It was like a good morning test, do the good morning test first and then kind of take the next step. And I always encourage mentees too, to be respectful and ask somebody, if you get the feeling that they are available for helping like you are, say, Dr. G, like, when do you want me to ask you questions? It shows a lot of respect for the mentor, so that the mentee is showing that, you have a process. I don't know what it is because I can't know unless I ask. And then you can, be able to support them.
Yeah. And if you can, try to get that doctor to like walk through the steps, kind of like I was saying when I did that with my team the other day, of like, okay, like if there's a case that you are comfortable with, like, can you walk me through it? Like, I'll have my technicians come in, and some of them want to be veterinarians, and I just sit there and I'm like nodding along as they're giving me the history, and then I say, what do you think? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I always preface it with, if you don't know, I will tell you. Don't worry, like, I'm not here to judge you or laugh at you that you don't know. I'm obviously the veterinarian, and you probably don't know these things. But I always try to test them, especially the ones that want to be vets, right? Like, let's start working on these ideas, and here's the framework that I use. Like, okay, here's the problems, make a differential list, and have it be broad so you can really go back and look at all the different things. But there's also so many of those pieces that are consistent. Like, you have a dog that has diarrhea. Okay, well, it's either primary GI or secondary GI, right? And work through that. There are definitely potentially other things going on. It's commonly dietary, so work towards that. Are they an itchy pet? Well, okay, it's probably allergies. Like, are they on flea meds? So, like, if you can develop an easy kind of like go-to, and then through diagnostics hit the deeper side of things. I think that's important, and that's something that those mentees can go to the mentor for and say, like, hey, what is your process? Like, can you work it with me? Let me just sit here and just word vomit this stuff while you're going through it, so that I can hear it and process it. And you're going to need so many opportunities of that. It's not one and done. I think they say, like, you need to be exposed to things like 7 times to be able to really take it in. And so if you can find that person who is open, like, latch on and really just try to pick as much from them as you can. And then also know that because you're not in vet school yet, you're going to change, and you're going to experience things that are going to change you, because vet school is, at least for me, it was super mind-blowing, because I really wanted to succeed, and I just studied my butt off as much as I could, and I took opportunities and did all these things, but, like, I am not the same person that I was before vet school. One, it isolated me very much. I used to be very outgoing. I came back and my mom was like, are you okay? Like, you're not as talkative as you used to be. And I'm like, I mean, I've had experiences now. Like, we as veterinarians do things that are not what normal people do. Euthanasia being a big part of that. Right? And so kind of understand that, like, what you learn before vet school is going to help you, but also be fluid and be able to kind of change as those waves are coming at you.
Yes, it's such good advice. Oh my gosh, I want to keep talking to you forever. But
are we getting the red light?
No, I do feel like we're wrapping it up, but I want to end this conversation with you the way we end our Ready Vet Go mentorship workshops, which is always around wins and the things that we love about veterinary medicine. Because while this profession is hard, and you've touched on some of those things, there's really some amazing things that we who are in it recognize, and it's why we're still here.
Yeah.
So is there a win in vet med, an awesome case you've had recently, or a business decision that you've made, or something that you just love about the veterinary profession that you can share with us?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying being at this teaching hospital. So I'm still working like a relief job. They bought me for 4 days a week kind of thing. So through the corporation, this company has purchased my services, but it's like a 6-month kind of time frame.
Okay.
So every 6 months it's going to renew until we decide that we're not going to do it anymore.
Okay.
And so I really like the teaching side of things. Like that's, I think later when I've made some money and have the ability to do something that doesn't require me to have a mortgage and all those kind of things, become a teacher, because I really like it. And so I've really been enjoying, like, I'll put up an x-ray on the TV in the front in the lobby and work with my team and be like, hey, this is what's going on. They seem to like it. I just did like a challenge where I had 50, there's 5 of them, technicians, and there was 10 challenges that they had to complete. And they had to get 45 points to complete the challenge. And what I did was I then had like a wheel of gifts. And so they got their 45 points. And it was a really good opportunity because I also learned what they didn't know. And they taught me how to run the blood machine and things like that. So like I think trying to like make it fun, having things that motivate the team and make it so that you're not just like barreling through the day, you know. Because some days are euthanasias. Like you feel like Dr. Death. And you get 3 or 4 of them in a day. Like a new client just shows up and you got to do it. And so having that ability to kind of make things fun and turn it into something that's not just the same grueling in and out.
I was just thinking that I feel very lucky for the teams that you get to work with and for the students that get to have you, because I really sense this kind of like joy and excitement and you just seem to really, really love it. And the way you communicate about it, I think, is just really unique. And so on behalf of the people that you work with, I think, you know, they're quite lucky. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I feel really lucky too. I mean, this was a surprise for me to be able to meet you and to interview you. And I've just learned so much, and I've loved connecting with you. And I'm really grateful that you were open and sharing everything with me. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And thank you guys for joining us. This has been Ready Vet Go, the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and check back more for more episodes.